President Barack Obama has overseen a number of firsts for lesbian, gay, and transgender people in the United States, including gay marriage. He's also appointed the first ever special envoy to represent the rights of the LGBT community around the world. In this week's One-on-One with Peter Clotty, Peter speaks with Randy Barry about his unique role and his message to Africans.
What would you say is the significance of the third adoption of the UN of the respect of human rights of the LGBTI community, particularly in Africa? What impact will it have there?
First, I think that it's deeply meaningful. I think by any objective measure, this is the most substantial action that the UN system has taken to systematize a focus on LGBTI persons and their human rights in its history. I think you can't really overstate that. So I think what that will do is bring greater resource, greater expertise to bear in a consultative capacity for those countries that seek it.
Why do you think there has been somewhat of a not significant progress on the respect of human rights of the LGBTI community in Africa?
I think that people generally have a lack of knowledge where the realities of this community are involved. There's a tendency, I believe, to think that this is a chosen behavior rather than, as we know, this being a feature of how a person is born. Just the same way a person is born with a particular race or ethnicity and a particular gender. The conversation really is about how we, as responsible progressive societies, make sure that equality and dignity under the law really means something, whether that's in the US or whether that's in South Africa or whether that's in Ghana or any other country.
Well, you've been to Africa, so you know the landscape pretty well. Recently, there were charges by some African leaders that the US, and for that matter, some Western countries are forcing them to address issues of the LGBTI community. How do you address some of these charges?
You know, I've had the chance, as I've traveled, to meet with a number of African leaders, including some who have changed, whether that's in political leadership, in traditional leadership, in business, who have changed their views on this. And I always ask the question, what changed your mind? And as is the case with so many of my fellow Americans, what changes a person's mind is when they understand and they know somebody who's affected by it. It adds a human element that then people can say, well, wait a minute, discrimination really isn't justified because this is someone I know. Certainly criminalization isn't justified because this is someone that I know. Should they be arrested simply due to their identity?
Mm-hmm. You are aware some African countries have promulgated laws, others are considering in their parliaments or legislature bills that criminalizes the LGBT community. How do you engage with some of these countries to tone down on some of their opposition to the respect of the rights of the LGBTI community in Africa?
We do that by having a very thorough conversation about what the implications of those laws can be. Many countries, whether it's in Africa or elsewhere, are made up of diverse populations, whether you mark that by tribal lines, whether you mark that by religious background or ethnic lines, that once you begin to single out a part of your community and say these people are different and they need to be punished based on an issue of identity, that's a very slippery slope. But we also engage in a different kind of conversation in many places, many of them in Africa, where you have this legacy of criminalization that was simply left over from colonial days, but then is somehow embraced as part of the culture, which I think there's a rich irony there. And in fact, these laws were imported into Africa. They were not part of the African cultural dialogue before this. So we are encouraging states to look at them because many African states have never arrested on the basis of these. They've never prosecuted, they've never jailed people on this basis. But their mere existence can be a significant problem because what it allows people to do.
What would be your message to the African leaders who have been opposed to the respect of the LGBTI community's human rights in these countries, who sometimes face oppression and sometimes criminalization, brutality, violence and all that?
Again, I think once a leader can meet people in their own community, their own society, who are directly impacted by this, that greatly deepens the ability to engage and to understand really what we're talking about at its root is not an issue of LGBTI community inclusion, it's an issue of equality. And whether or not the parts of our Constitution or legal arrangements that guarantee equality of citizenship are real or not. And that's ultimately what we're talking about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.